You've tried. Not once. Not twice. You've had the conversation. You've said the words. You've been clear. Maybe for the first time in your entire relationship with these people, and they looked at you and kept going. Like you hadn't said anything at all. Or, and this might be worse, they heard you, they acknowledged it, they apologized. And then, 3 weeks later, it was like the conversation never happened, and now you're sitting with this question that nobody in your family will help you answer. Is it me? Am I asking for too much? Is this just how families work and I missed the memo? You're not asking for too much, but there's something specific happening in family systems when limits get set. Something structural, something psychological, something that goes back further than the conversation you tried to have last month. And until you understand what it is, you're going to keep trying to win an argument in a game that isn't being played by the rules you think it is. That's what this video is about. Family is not a collection of individuals who happen to live together or share a history. It's a system, and systems have one primary drive: homeostasis, staying the same. Psychiatrist Murray Bowen, the architect of family systems theory, spent decades describing how families operate less like groups of separate people and more like a single emotional organism. The members of the family aren't just affecting each other. They're regulating each other, constantly, unconsciously, the way your body regulates its own temperature. You don't decide to sweat. It just happens to restore balance. When you set a limit, when you change your role in the system, even slightly, the family organism detects a threat to its balance. And it responds, not because your family members are malicious, not even because they disagree with your limit in any conscious way, but because your change in behavior requires every other person in that system to adjust how they relate to you. And adjustment is uncomfortable. Change costs something. So the system applies pressure to restore what it knows. Bowen called this the pull toward togetherness. The family's gravitational pull toward fusion, toward everyone being who they've always been in relation to everyone else. If you've always been the one who absorbs criticism without comment, who shows up when called, who doesn't have needs that complicate the gathering, then asserting a limit in just a request. To the system, it reads as a threat to the structure itself. That's why they don't just disagree. They dismiss, they circle back, they pretend it didn't happen. Because the system is working to erase the change, not engage with it. This doesn't make it okay, but it does make it make sense. And make sense is the beginning of knowing what you're actually dealing with. Every family system assigns roles, not formally. Nobody sat you down and said, "You'll be the peacekeeper. You'll be the one who doesn't have needs that disturb the air." It happened incrementally, through what got rewarded and what got punished, through who laughed at what, through which version of you made the room easier. And at some point, probably before you were old enough to choose, you learned your role, and you played it well. Psychologist Salvador Minichin described how these roles aren't just patterns, they're load-bearing. The family structure depends on each person filling their function. The peacekeeper keeps the peace. The scapegoat absorbs the blame. The parentified child manages the adult's emotional states. The golden child provides the reflected pride. These aren't metaphors. They're actual functional positions in a living structure. So, when you try to set a limit, when you stop fulfilling the role, or start asking for something the role doesn't include, you're not just changing your behavior. You're destabilizing a structure that multiple people have been leaning on. Some of them have been leaning on it their entire lives. That's why the response you get isn't proportionate to the limit you set. You said you need a day's notice before visiting, and the reaction felt like you accused someone of a crime. Because to the system, the size of the threat isn't measured by the content of your request. It's measured by what your change in role costs everyone else. And here's where this gets genuinely dark, because some of you are going to realize, sitting with this, that the role you were assigned was specifically designed to serve someone else's dysfunction. That your softness made someone's hardness more livable. that your flexibility made someone else's rigidity comfortable, that the family didn't just benefit from your compliance, it was built around it. I know what advice you've been given. Use I statements. Pick the right time. Don't be defensive. Be clear. Be consistent. Be patient. And maybe you've tried all of it. Maybe you've been impeccably clear and breathtakingly patient and still nothing moved. Here's why. Communication advice assumes the problem is a communication failure. That if you said it the right way, they'd hear it. But what the family systems research shows is that in enmeshed or role-rigid family structures, the issue isn't comprehension, it's cost. They understand what you're asking. Understanding isn't the obstacle. What they can't do, or won't, is pay what respecting it would cost them. A 2011 study published in Family Process found that the most significant predictor of whether a family member would honor a stated limit wasn't how the limit was expressed. Not tone, not clarity, not timing, but whether honoring that limit would require them to examine or change their own behavior. When a limit required self-reflection, compliance dropped dramatically. When it didn't, when it was relatively costless, compliance was high. Which means, if your limit requires your parent to reckon with how they parented, if it requires your sibling to acknowledge a pattern that implicates them, if it requires anyone in that system to see themselves differently, the limit isn't going to be respected through better communication. It's going to be respected through consequences, or isn't going to be respected at all. I know that's hard to hear, but the alternative is spending another decade refining how you say the same thing to people who have already shown you that the saying isn't the issue. So, what do you do with a system that's working against you? First, and this runs against everything you've been told, stop trying to change the system. You cannot reason a family system into restructuring itself. You can only change your position within it consistently enough that the system is forced to recalibrate around your actual behavior rather than your assigned role. Bowen called this differentiation of self the process of maintaining your own identity, values, and choices inside an emotionally fused system without either cutting off entirely or collapsing back into the old role under pressure. Differentiation is not distance. It's not coldness. It's being fully present with your family while remaining fully yourself, which sounds simple and is one of the hardest things a person can do with people who knew them before they knew themselves. Practically, this means state your limit once, clearly, without a lengthy explanation and without apology, and then enforce it with your behavior rather than your words. If you say you won't attend events where a specific dynamic plays out, don't attend. Not as punishment, not to make a point, because the limit is real and you mean it. Second, manage the guilt as a signal, not a verdict. Guilt will come. In family systems, the guilt you feel when you enforce a limit is usually the sound of the system pulling you back to your role. It's not evidence you did something wrong. It's the homeostatic mechanism doing its job, trying to restore the prior balance by making the change feel unbearable. Name it. That's the system pulling, not, I've hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Third, recalibrate what success looks like. In most limit-setting frameworks, success means the other person changes. They get it. They respect the limit. The relationship improves. In family systems, particularly entrenched ones, that's not where success lives, at least not at first. Success is you enforcing the limit when it's violated, without losing yourself in the process. Success is showing up as the differentiated version of yourself even when the system responds with pressure, guilt, and grief. The system may eventually recalibrate around your new position. Some families do, some don't. But you can only wait for that from a place of having already held the limit, not from a place of hoping your clarity was finally clear enough. Here's what I want you to hold. Your family not respecting your limits is painful in a way that a friend not respecting them isn't, because it carries all the weight of what you needed from them when you were small and couldn't choose to leave, because it contains the particular grief of being unseen by people who are supposed to see you first. That grief is real, Don't skip it. But the fact that they haven't respected your limits doesn't mean the limits are wrong. It means the system is doing what systems do. It means the roles are what they've always been. And it means that changing your position in that system, slowly, consistently, without requiring their buy-in to proceed, is the only thing that has ever changed any family system. Not the clearest conversation, not the most patient explanation. The changed behavior held. You're allowed to grieve the family you needed, while also refusing to keep paying the cost of the one you have. Both things are true. You can hold both. If this touched something specific, leave it in the comments, especially what role you were assigned, because I think naming it out loud is part of how it stops running you. Stay detached.